You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Rob Manfred hates baseball.
This is true. The commissioner of baseball hates it, hates his sport.
He hates the game that he's the commissioner of. It is so obvious when you see this thing that came out over the last couple of days, and supposedly Manfred claims there's a quote-unquote buzz around adding the new golden at-bat rule to Major League Baseball. This is from Jason Stark. And this is what the rule essentially does. This rule, if it was enacted by Rob Manfred, who hates baseball, would allow a team to choose one at-bat in every game in which they could use their best hitter regardless of where that hitter is in the lineup. Essentially, it no longer is baseball. I would say at this point, what you have done is stripped away all of the strategy, all of the ebb and flow of the game, all of the bounce of the ball, all of the big moments in baseball become cheapened. If Aaron Judge comes to the plate next year against Shohei Ohtani, who's now back, let's say, and he's dominant, and he's out there pitching against him in a big moment in the postseason, and there's one out and the base is loaded, and it's a big at-bat that lasts like 15 pitches, and he gets Judge to go down 2 outs. Does Judge get to get back in there after seeing 15 pitches and Shohei has to start over again? That's not baseball. That cheapens the sport. That ruins it, Ed. And that's just one of the many examples that are floating through my head right now.
Well, and that's what immediately comes to mind. I mean, you think about the idea of a pinch hitter. So let's say it's a situation where Judge is serving as the DH and he gets an at-bat in consecutive innings, okay? Because he came up in the 8th inning and then he comes up again in the 9th inning because you don't want, insert name of Yankee who can't hit here, whoever it might be. That, you sit there and you go, oh, all right, okay, I can see where there's a little bit of enticement there, but then, yeah, your version of events where you've got a guy who is maybe has been out of the game after defensive replacement, a guy who has just had the at-bat, or what if, it's one of those things where you sit there and go, okay, well, Aaron Judge has this guy's number, so I'm going to send him up down 1 with the bases empty, and he ties it up, and now I'm going to send him right back up to hit this guy again, and it's home run derby.
Yeah, think about this. And you just brought it up. What happens if late in a game, and imagine how this would have changed the White Sox fortunes. They might not have lost 121. They would have only lost 110. Because Pedro did this all year long. He would make a mistake late in the game and all of a sudden take a bat out of the lineup for some sort of a replacement. And now all of a sudden you could bring the guy back when the team comes back on you. And now you need offense late in extra innings. The possibilities of how this could screw up the game are endless. The players union should hate it. If you're a skilled catcher in Major League Baseball who's able to play fair to average defense, and you can hit, which makes you valuable and a multimillionaire. This rule now says that you would just go out and get the most defensive catcher you have, who throws out guys left and right, is amazing at framing, and hits 198. You could have that guy on your team because the moment when he comes up, and again, this would have helped the White Sox greatly this year, right? Like Martin Maldonado comes up and you can 100%. bring in your golden at bat now. So you can play him as a defensive player, and that one moment when the bases are loaded, you could say Luis Robert Jr. is hitting for him. Or anybody on your team can come up, and whoever's hot, whoever's the perfect matchup, the lefty righty, whatever it is, you just get to bring that guy in and hit for him in the game. Think of how many White Sox games could have been changed. Like, we watched a terrible season, but one of the things that drove us nuts during this terrible season was the mismanagement and the way that things would happen and you didn't have a hitter at the moment you needed a hitter. You would have greatly changed the outcome of a terrible team over multiple games. I'm telling you right now, Sox win 10 more games with this rule. And I hate the rule.
And I'm actually thinking the Sox might lose 10 more games because, Pedro would have messed it up by doing something like, well, we felt Luis Robert Jr. was a little cold in that situation. And Andrew Vaughn is, of course, the greatest baseball player that has ever played the game.
Yeah,
so we had to put him up there.
He would have put the wrong guy in. You're right. He would have put the wrong guy in there, but I'm saying right now,
Gavin Sheets would have had an extra 200 at-bats.
Listen. He would have put the wrong guy in there, but the point remains that you're changing the game. You've taken a game that I love, and you've taken away the strategy. I mean, as a person who roots for a team in the American League, I thought the idea of getting rid of the DH in the National League kind of cheapened the game. It took away the strategy. I used to like watching National League games and watching the double switches and the manager have to actually think.
Oh, yeah.
When he was doing things.
You had to have a bench. You had to have players. You had to have guys that could actually field a position and hit. You had to have professional pinch hitters. There was a lot of things that went into roster construction. That was part of the strategy.
Right, and what you're doing is you're pulling that away. You're changing the makeup of the game. You're changing the stats. You're making it so that I'm never going to be able to actually compare like statistics from 30 years ago to statistics from now because now they're all skewed. I mean, it's the same thing that they did. Look, when they started including other leagues outside of Major League Baseball in their overall stats thing, that really changed things because while those players may have been great and it might have been wrong that they weren't involved in baseball.
Definitely.
They didn't actually play against the same players at the same time. So now it makes it very, very hard to judge statistics. It was a weird decision. This is another thing that takes it away. I mean, baseball's beautiful because, with all its flaws, and I just mentioned a flaw, the fact that there were people who weren't allowed to play in it because of the color of their skin for way too long. That was a flaw.
Massive flaw, yeah.
Even with flaws, the game is great because I can compare players from different eras because the rules have generally stayed the same. I can compare teams from different eras because the rules have generally stayed the same. You can't even compare football in the 80s and 90s to football today because the rules have changed so drastically, because of the way that defenses can hit people differently than they can hit them now. Most sports, it is very hard to sit there and say so-and-so would be a great hockey player today. So-and-so would be a great football player today. You don't know. Some of them might not be that good playing in the modern era. Even in basketball, for crying out loud. The defense and the way that guys knocked each other around and the way that the rules were, it's a very different game now than it was back then. It's very hard to say that somebody from 30 years ago would definitely be the exact same player now. And it's very hard to look at somebody now and imagine what would they do when Bill Laimbeer knocked them on their ass for no reason and there was no penalty for doing so. But in baseball, the game has remained generally the same. I believe Ted Williams would hit 400 in the modern era just as much as he could hit 400 when he played. You're going to change that because Rob Manfred hates baseball. He hates the history of baseball. He hates the sport of baseball. He hates the strategy of baseball. He hates the fans that root for baseball. Look how he treated the people of Oakland. Look how he's treated them. He hates baseball. We have a commissioner that dislikes the game. I mean, even Kennesaw Mountain Landis was a guy who really didn't have anything to do with baseball, but at least he wasn't in there interfering with the game. Like, if you're not into it and all you really want to do is be an executive that looks over it, then shut up and get out of the way. Sox in the Basement listeners, switch to a new age of life. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living and make it so they can get around on their own and live independently. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment on the south side wants to help. They have stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. Hyatt works with your insurance and has 0% financing for qualified individuals. The latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors and CPAP machines. Switch now. If you want to get rid of that CPAP machine, get your supplies directly mailed to you. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Learn more about them at hhme.com.
The whole idea of some of these rule changes, like I get the pitch clock thing. I don't think a pitcher from I don't think Bob Gibson would have cared about the pitch clock because he was ready to go and he wanted to be on the mound. And there were some pitchers, that were known as human rain delays. Rick Sutcliffe of the Cubs was notorious for taking his sweet time around the mound and stuff like that. There's some guys that would have had to have adapted, but by and large, something like that, not a big deal. Widening the bases a little bit, limiting the throws over, that type of stuff. Limiting the throws over changes some strategy, but I understand that it makes it easier to get stolen bases going. It does generate offense, and it's okay. Like, that one was an okay rule, but this type of thing, now it's just, you're just doing it for show. You're just doing it because there's a few players that Rob Manfred feels like he can really rally dollars around and push, and that's all it is.
You're doing it for moments in the postseason.
It's a TikTok of Aaron Judge. That's all he wants.
You're doing this for moments in the postseason. I'm going to tell you something right now. It isn't as special if Freddie Freeman hits that home run in game 1 of the World Series if it's his second at bat, or if it wasn't his time to come up. Heck, think about afterwards, where his dad admits that he was afraid. He wanted that game to end early. He was hoping Mookie would do it because he didn't want to see Freddie up there because of the pressure, because he was just a dad worried for his son. Think of the drama that surrounded it. It was palpable inside of the stadium. If you watched the game on TV, you could feel it. Now add in the fact that in that moment, they can just bring up whoever they want to. Maybe they bring up somebody else. Freddie Freeman was dealing with injury. You don't even get that moment. You don't. You think Kirk Gibson comes up when there would have been an option to bring in anybody else? No, they would have gone with somebody healthy who'd have been hitting well in this series. Freddie Freeman, we didn't even know he was going to have that kind of World Series. In game 1, does he even get that moment with the ankle injury? I don't know if he does. So the reasoning behind it is we're doing I'm telling you, that's what they're doing. They want to have more things that they can show that go viral on social media because they think it grows the game. So you're going to get that if you're able to bring up the best guy against the best guy in the biggest situation. But what you're going to do is you're going to take away the magic, because the magic was that Freeman had gone through so much all year long. His kid had been in the hospital. He had massive injuries. He's a nice guy. He's playing hurt. He comes up in that moment and he hits that home run. And you want to know what they would have done if this rule is in place? Mookie would have batted again. They would have gone somewhere else with that. You wouldn't have gotten the same moment, and it wouldn't have meant so much when the ball went out of into the stands. This is a terrible idea. The idea that it was even suggested, if there is a group of people, whether they be owners, if it's the Players Association, whatever it is, the suggestion of this rule tells me this guy shouldn't be commissioner of Major League Baseball. He should never be, he needs to be removed. Just the idea of it, even if the rule doesn't happen, even if it's laughed away, even if everybody fights the thing, even if it fizzles out and dies, even if this is just some story that happened this week and next week we'll never hear about it again, he should not be allowed to be the commissioner of Major League Baseball. So alarm bells should be going off with anybody that has any power to remove this man from the office. He is bad for the game. He's bad for the sport. He's bad for the history of the game. He's bad for the moments. He's bad for the magic. He's bad for everything. I mean, there are some rules that I haven't had a problem with. I hate the thing with the base runner and extra innings.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And it was put in for the stupidest reason ever, remember? We're playing an outdoor sport during COVID. Something in which scientifically they were probably their safest standing out there, safer than being in the locker room, and you're hurrying them back to the locker room as quickly as possible, so you're going to put a batter on second base. Like after playing 9 innings, that extra time out there and extra innings, that's when everybody would get sick. It was the stupidest reason in the world. That was the reason it was floated originally for it. That was one of the COVID safety rules. It made no sense. It placated dummies. And they forced the thing in there. Like, look, there's some strategy to it, but I think we've all figured out what the strategy is, right? The strategy is to immediately walk the guy that's up at the plate to put a force out on, and then attack the next batter and try to get a double play.
Unless you're Pedro Grifol, yeah.
Right, but that's what most of Major League Baseball does. It's an easy adjustment to it. It's the idea a base hit's going to score the runner, so you might as well increase the possibility of getting the double play. Because at least that way, if the double play occurs, the runner standing on third, you've got 2 outs, a sacrifice isn't going to bring him in, and you're going to get out of the inning. If your pitcher does something big and he strikes that guy out, now you got one out, the double play is still on. It's not rocket science. And so in the end, you're actually starting to see, even with the guy on second base, extra innings are starting to get longer and longer because they're figuring out how to approach it and they're changing the odds in it. There is some strategy to it, but I think a little league manager can figure out exactly what to do with it. So I don't think it enhances the game. Now you want to say, hey, we want to get people home by a certain time. Fine. I mean, I get your reasoning. I don't need to like it, but that at least doesn't destroy the game. This destroys the game of baseball in my mind. This would be the first time I would sit there and say this rule hurts the game of baseball and changes what it is. The pitch clock doesn't bother me. Get out there and pitch, for crying out loud. You want to know what the pitch clock is for? The pitch clock is because umpires have no power and nobody's afraid of any authority anymore. Okay? An umpire in 1940 would have yelled at, Joe Blow out there on the mound and be like, pitch the damn ball, or I'm gonna crowd the, I'm gonna make your strike zone smaller.
Or I'm gonna meet you in the parking lot and nobody would have batted an eye.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like baseball used to regulate itself because umpires and those around the game police the game. That's why you have all those stupid hidden rules. All that stuff stopped. All the unwritten rules seem to disappear. With the little strike zone thing now, umpires really, I mean, with the exception of some that are really bad, but I think the ones that are bad do it because they're just bad at being an umpire. But you don't see that like, okay, now I'm just going to start messing with this pitcher because he's dragging the game out. Now I'm going to start messing with this batter. Like, how many times do you think when an umpire got mad at Carlton Fisk and made his strike zone bigger than it should be when he got to the plate? And then told him, like, I don't want to be here forever and you're dragging the game out. So guess what? You have a bigger strike zone. Like, that happened.
Oh, yeah.
That's how baseball was. You had to put in the pitch clock because all the modern factors had started to slow the games down. It started with the Yankees and the Red Sox in the 90s. 5-hour playoff games. It was brutal. And then they became 5-hour games in July between the two of them. And then all of Major League Baseball slowly became that. And so I get some of the rules. Like, I get it. I have no problem with your pitch clock. It doesn't bother me at all. Guess what? Baseball players adjusted. It's very rare you see a clock violation. I'm fine with that. But you know what? If you really want to improve your game, start holding your umpires accountable. Don't start doing stupid stuff like this. This is dumb.
And definitely don't do it for moments, for moments that you can put in a video package, because you are cheapening the game that way. And it's not about the best players doing it. Honestly, the thing that we love about baseball is that anybody can be a hero at any time.
Larry Garcia made all kinds of money because of that moment. Remember?
Yeah, and he wasn't even all that heroic with that moment.
No, but here's the thing. You're like, does he get that at bat? Does he get
No.
that? Does he get that money? Like, I'm telling you right now, Players Association, start asking yourself, who does this benefit? Because it doesn't benefit the majority of the baseball players on the field.
How about Francisco Cabrera for the 92 Braves knocking in Sid Bream, a backup catcher forced to use as a pinch hitter because Bobby Cox has nobody left on his bench? That is forever indelibly inked in a lot of baseball fans' minds as being one of those great moments, because here's this guy who didn't belong at the plate in the first place, and he's got to do it. Rick Camp, who was a reliever, hitting one out to drag on a 17-inning game.
Jeff Blum.
Jeff frickin' Blum.
Jeff Blum in Game 3. We don't even get to that. That game's probably over sooner because there's other guys that get to come in.
Because you could have used Paulie a number of different times in that game to end it.
Think of the matchups. Does Scott Podsednik in Game 2, a guy who had no regular season home runs, does he get a chance to hit the walk-off against Brad Lidge when you could have put Paul Konerko in there who had already hit the grand slam and give him another chance? Does Ozzie change his batter? I mean, this is what I'm telling. I'm telling you right now, the thing you love about baseball and the magic of the postseason and the thing about the game where you sit in the outfield with your kid and you explain the strategy of what is going on all disappears with the golden at bat rule. Like, this would be a travesty. I mean, and you think about what this commissioner's office has done. Look at what it did to the fan base of Oakland and how cold and callous it was to it. Look at how it allows Jerry Reinsdorf to operate the way that he operates and the misery that you live in as a fan base. And we're not the only fan base living in that kind of misery. Go look at Pittsburgh. There's plenty of fan bases living in misery. This commissioner allows this garbage. And now he wants to change the game? I mean, I'm sorry. I know it's been 20 minutes of Sox in the Basement yelling about the commissioner of baseball, but somebody's got to yell about this guy. This guy sucks. Sox in the Basement listeners trying to make the most of your money. Give a call to Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor. Located on the corner of 111th and Kedzie, but serving the Chicagoland area, Tom has a get-to-know-you approach and a do-the-right-thing attitude. He's been doing this for decades. It's all about knowing your options when you're investing and planning for your retirement. No matter what stage you are at, it costs nothing to check in with Tom. Give Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor, a call today, 773-779-0023. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
It's one of those things where, on one hand, as White Sox fans, we probably have other things that we could talk about that are more related to the team. But the fundamental thing is that we're White Sox fans partially and mostly because we're baseball fans, right? And a lot of White Sox fans, I think, are the same way, where it's you're not rooting for the laundry because it's hip and cool to be a White Sox fan. It's not something where it's a status symbol. I mean, granted, White Sox jerseys and hats have made their way into pop culture plenty of times since the 90s, especially when they went silver and black, and we're all happy about that. But we're here because we love the game of baseball, and it's played on the south side of Chicago, and that's where we want to root for these guys. That's where we want to root for our baseball team. That's one of the reasons why we're so mad at Jerry Reinsdorf, because he insists that it's all about his ballpark, and it's all about the experience that you have drinking a certain type of milkshake at his ballpark. But it's not. We want to see good baseball on the field. And having a golden at bat rule, all it does is it just favors a team that has that one guy. And this is where it destroys baseball, is that it favors the team that has that one guy. Well, when does your guy get to become that guy, right? When does the plucky player that you really, really like, that you think has a future, get to become the hero? He gets robbed of those moments when you are constantly replacing him with a superstar. I can remember another example just popped into my head. Paul Konerko, struggling like hell, right, early on in his career. Ends up in an at-bat against everyday Eddie Guardado, ends up hitting a ball out of the ballpark. Kind of turns him around a little bit. It was something he desperately needed, an at-bat that he needed to have and a success that he needed to have in that season. Frank Thomas could have very easily taken that moment from him. Does Paulie ever recover at that point? You don't know.
I mean, that's an amazing point, and we can look at it from the White Sox, from a White Sox fan standpoint, but that example exists all over the history of Major League Baseball.
All the
Paul
time.
Konerko never becomes Paul Konerko to lead you in the big moments in 2005 if he's constantly replaced by Frank Thomas every time they need to use that rule. It never happens. He never learns how to do it. He never is capable of doing it. You stunt his ability in his career. He makes less money. Again, Major League Baseball players who are not the number one or number two hitter on their team should be all upset about this idea today. They should be against this. The players union needs to stop it. It can't happen. Here's what you're going to do if you do that. You're going to take away money and you're going to take away opportunity from Major League Baseball players. You're going to tell guys who their whole lives wanted to be a star in the major leagues. You're going to work your whole life. You're going to get there. You're going to work your butt off. You're going to have a few big moments. You're going to eventually turn into a star on a team. You're make a ton of money. And no, you're not going to do that, actually. You're going to get there. You're going to get some opportunities. But in reality, by the time you make it there, there'll already be an established star that your manager believes in every big moment. And that guy's getting them all. It's mind-boggling to me. And there are going to be people, there are going to be these national baseball writers who've got their noses so far up Rob Manfred's behind that they're going to sit there and try to tell you about the strategy behind it and how this refreshes the game and this is a good idea. And guess what? If they're saying that, they hate baseball too. They hate baseball too. Maybe they hate baseball because they've watched too many games. Maybe they've had so much unfettered access and they get to be on the field all the time, it's become boring to them and they've lost their spark. Maybe that's it. I mean, I remember there was a time after years of doing morning radio and getting into every rock concert, I really didn't care that I was backstage and met Ozzy Osbourne. I was like, just another guy. I lost the thrill of it, Ed. Maybe that's the case.
Maybe
does
that's happen.
Maybe these guys that are on the field and have unfettered access and can do whatever the heck they want to, maybe they've lost the excitement over the game that the rest of us have. I don't think they're the experts you should be listening to on this. I think your initial thing, and I would imagine the majority of people listening to this, their initial thing when they heard that rule was, that's a terrible idea. I don't want that. Your initial reaction to it is 100% dead on. Don't let anybody change your mind.
There's rule changes, and then there's destroying the fabric of the game. And now you could have some more fun with this, I guess. I mean, you could just say the golden at bat means that they have to swing a bat made out of solid gold. They're not going to be able to do much with that. No, I don't care. Aaron Judge, anybody, Shohei, it doesn't matter. That's going to be a tall order.
Does he come walking up with a golden helmet that's got the team insignia on it?
Oh, of course.
I would imagine there's a massive graphic.
How about a whole golden suit of armor?
Right. All of the lights in the stadium and all the scoreboards immediately turn bright gold. It's a golden moment, right? And then like the graphic across your screen says golden at bat, right? It's so dumb.
And that's the thing is what is the pomp and circumstance around this where it's like golden at bat time? Brought to you by Bob's Golden Shot. No, that's not right.
Here's the thing. His rule changes sometimes sound like Bill Veck's ideas, but even Veck knew not to do it. Or if he did it, he did it for one game, but he wasn't going to do it all the time. Like it was showmanship. This isn't showmanship. This is insane.
I don't understand how you could look at the game of baseball ever under any circumstances and sit there and say, this is a good idea. This is what was intended. Let's ignore over a century of how this game has been played and let's make it about individual stars. Let's make it about individuals who can do one thing well. Because let's face it, you're putting up in the golden at bat, you're putting the guy up who hits the ball out of the ballpark.
I look at some of the deals that are being signed right now, and I just don't understand how Major League Baseball players think they're going to make money if you take away, if you lower, you're tamping down talent by doing this. You're, like we said,
100%.
You're not allowing guys to develop. You're not giving big moments. You get a guy who does really well all of a sudden in a playoff series because he has a few moments to go do it. It can change his entire life and what he actually makes for a living. I mean, I'm looking at, and this may not be the perfect thing because I can't remember exactly when he had his moment. I mean, did you see that Tommy Edman got a 5-year, $74 million contract extension from the Dodgers?
I did see that,
He basically got Andrew Benintendi's deal, which is $5 and $75. He got $5 and $74 with a $17 million signing bonus and deferred money included in the deal.
So he got better than Benny.
And think about this. And he's a utility man.
Right.
He's not a superstar at all. And I look at that and I think to myself, like, White Sox fans think that Benintendi's like getting overpaid and that's a big contract. And it's not a big contract. Again, as you go through this offseason, I just want you to understand that. Like when deals get signed by this White Sox team, okay, you've got utility guys getting 5 years and $75 million. That's what you've got.
This is a
right
career
now.
263 hitter with a career OPS of 726, and he barely played last year.
He had a couple of moments where he was valuable in the World Series in the playoffs, but again, he wasn't the MVP, and that's what he got. So like, look, you keep hearing this thing like, oh, the Sox would love to move Benintendi because of the big contract. Is it that big? It's not that big. It's not that big. They've got to sign a bunch of guys to that contract to be a legitimate team.
No, the White Sox want to move Benintendi because he can't catch the baseball in left field, and he hasn't been nearly as good a hitter as he used to be.
That's fine.
Before he signed that contract. He's underperforming.
But the money aspect of his contract is not as big as people make it out to be in comparison to the rest of Major League Baseball. I mean, it's expensive to Jerry Reinsdorf, but that's because he's cheap. It's expensive to White Sox fans because they've been conditioned that that's expensive. It's not actually expensive if a utility man is getting that as just a basic deal thrown out to him to extend him out for 5 years. It's not a big amount of money.
No, and we all have to remember with Jerry Reinsdorf, expensive is not ordering off of the $1, $2, $3 menu at McDonald's. I mean, that's expensive for him.
Yeah, but you get a food discount if you're a season ticket holder this year. Be excited about that.
Oh, what's the discount on? You don't have to tip?
You watch. They've announced the food discount. I bet you the food costs more.
Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement.
Socks in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on socksinthebasement.com.